Hi there, and welcome to Zamna's sixth webinar, and the first of our three focusing specifically on health and the role that identity plays in ensuring safe and secure travel. Now, if you've been to one of our webinars before, you'll notice that it's a little bit different today. We've got fewer guests because we wanted a more intimate and more detailed conversation. So the two guests I have today are Simon Talling-Smith from the CommonPass, and we've got Alex Gorelik as well, CTO at Zamna. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a moment. But we are focusing today in our webinar on the need to have good, consistent testing, to know what sort of tests are needed to travel and how these health tests and checks need to be provable and owned by an individual. So who am I? I'm Raoul Cooper. I'm VP for product here at Zamna, and I've had over 20 years of experience in the travel sector, having worked many of those years with an airline, actually crossing over with Simon at one point, about 20 years ago. I've covered both IT and traveler-centric problems, solving issues around identity and biometrics. By way of introduction to our session today then, we are looking at identity, and we're looking at health, and we're looking at how we restart travel. Let's have a quick look at where we are actually today. There is light at the end of the tunnel, even though we are still seeing new lockdowns come into effect, especially around Europe, Eastern Europe in particular. But we're also seeing the rapid rise of vaccination as well as wider scale testing becoming more and more available. In the UK, we are seeing that the vaccine and health passports as a conversation that's happening around the political circles are indeed controversial, with implications both on the social and ethical standpoints. And these need to be balanced with a practical desire to ensure that gatherings, be they events or international travels, are indeed as safe as can be. What is clear is that there will be differences from country to country, and the bar may well go up or down in the quest to enable commerce and people movement to re-establish itself both domestically and internationally. We will explore today the need for having consensus around cross-border regulatory framework and to safely restart international travel. At the moment, we have capacity running at incredibly low numbers, often single digits compared to what we saw in 2019 for international travel. Despite this, we are still seeing queues though, and a lot of the processing in and around the airport. This applies not just to the departure process, but also to the arrivals process. So it's a challenge not just for airlines and airports, but also for government agencies. If this industry is to recover, it will need to be able to scale and to scale fast as well. The current solutions in play don't really satisfy this and actually leave the door open for fraudulent actions and unverified or copied tests. In order to make sense of all of this and what is needed to solve the problem, we need to cut through the noise. There is a lot of talk about solutions. Indeed, I'm sure in your own LinkedIn feeds, you've seen a number of app-based solutions popping up all over this, the shop. Some are specific point plays and some are simply information gathering options. But what really needs to be done in order to enable travel and travel at scale? Well, rather than me steal the thunder of our amazing guests today, I will let them explain how we make sense of the volatility of the environment and how CommonPass and Zamna can solve this conundrum. So first of all, I want to welcome Simon. So could I ask you, Simon, just to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about where you've come from in your experience within the travel industry.
Yeah, thanks, Raoul, and thanks for having me here today. Really an honor to be on your webinar. My background is all travel. So I have been in the travel industry, in and around it for, gosh, I'm afraid to say it's about 30 years, which is just confirming what Raoul said earlier. We did cross each other at British Airways many, many years ago. I've worked in most different parts of the world. I've worked in airlines. I've worked in travel technologies. I've worked in very large airlines and tiny startups. And now I am president of CommonPass, which is one of the products launched over the last year by a new non-profit foundation called the Commons Project. The Commons Project is a international foundation started in the US, now headquartered in Switzerland. And it was set up with the aim of using digital assets, using the power of the internet for the common good, instead of purely for good old-fashioned making profit. It's a different way of working. It's there to solve problems that a single government or agency or company couldn't solve on their own. And we started about a year ago. We were probably only 7 people. We're about 80 people now, and we'll be about 200 people in a year's time. So that's me, and that's the Commons Project. Really good to be with you.
Thank you, Simon. Great introduction. Look forward to digging a little bit deeper as to what you're doing. Alex, over to yourself. Would you mind just introducing yourself and a bit of your background too? Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Raoul. My academic background is in pure math and advanced cryptography. Before Zamna, it was about 15 years of managing and leading full-stack development teams, predominantly in travel industry. So from small startups to large enterprises. Zamna actually started as an IP research, as a patent in the first place. That we did together with my co-founder, Ira. Since then, we've developed a lot more new IP. We develop our products on the market, and we see how our technologies are already helping airlines and other travel segment companies to get out of the crisis.
Thank you, Alex. Great to hear where you've come from as well. So let's get started with our conversation, our debate today. And where do we start? To help structure this, I think, and to help give some context, I'm going to give an example of a conversation I had with a Canadian gentleman just the other day. He was going back to Canada from the UK and sorting out what he needed to do to travel there. And it took him all of a Saturday, the best part of 7 hours, to really understand what was needed in order to both arrive in Canada, but also then to get a return trip back to the United Kingdom, ensuring that everything was satisfied from the point of view of testing and PCR tests, but also in terms of had he met the requirements that the government was setting out. And to say that it gave him an anxiety would be probably an understatement after doing many, many hours of this and making sure that he was in the right place. It was stressful. And this seems to be one of the inhibitors at the moment in terms of returning travel back to where it used to be. So without getting too much into solutions, the first question to both of the gentlemen I've got on the call here is, well, what is it that we actually need to focus on, both from a health point of view and maybe from an identity point of view? You know, what is a health passport? What is the importance of accountability of tests, for example? So from that point of view, Simon, can I invite yourself, first of all, just to talk about how do we cut through the noise from the health perspective, from the CommonPass perspective?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you asked a lot of really very, very good and also quite difficult questions there. Let's start with a simple one, which is what makes a good digital health pass? I think there are 3 things. The first is that a good digital health pass needs to be trusted. And of course, that might sound obvious, right? But actually, already in the world of certification for tests and vaccines, you know, remember, every time someone says tests, they really need to be saying tests and vaccines. The industry of forgery is already rife. It's rather sad in the world in which we're trying to combat the pandemic that plenty of people are making money out of forgery, but that's the world we're in. So for a pass to be trusted, you need to be able to know that the test that was taken on that pass or the vaccine that was evident on that pass was signed, digitally signed, at the point of origin. Whoever did the test digitally signed that test and said, yes, this is the test, and this was the person that had that test. And that digital signature and identity needs to pass all the way down the chain until the pass is actually verified by the body that is trying to check, is it okay for Simon to come in? And let's face it, that could be, is it okay for Simon to come into the UK? Is it okay for Simon to go into Heathrow Airport? Is it okay for Simon to go into an aeroplane, or even a theatre, a sports stadium, a music venue, an outdoor festival? The second thing beyond trusted is that a good digital health pass should be private. We're in a danger that in a rush to demonstrate our health status, that we start sharing health information liberally, randomly, around the internet. And of course, there are fears that digital health data will be gathered by some for reasons that are not helpful to the individual. We've all seen what happened to our cookie data. If you're scared about what happened to your cookie data, imagine what could happen to your health data. So a good digital health pass should keep data private. And we believe at the Commons Project, that means as much as possible keeping data at the edge, keeping it on a mobile device that belongs to the individual, and not keeping server copies of personal information and health data, and not passing personal information and core original health data around the digital universe. The third thing that I think is really important about a digital health pass is it should be checked. It's okay to be able to rock up at a check-in desk for a flight and show a test certificate, and maybe a little bit better if you can show a digital version of that test certificate, but you're then relying on a human being behind a check-in desk to not just verify the authenticity of that certificate. So yeah, that looks like it has come from a genuine test center, probably in another country. It looks like it's valid and hasn't been interfered with. And it looks like it's okay for the journey that this person wants to take. That's a lot of checks for an individual to make in a complex and fast-changing landscape. And so a good health pass should do all of that check-in behind the scenes. And the individual, the traveler, or the concert goer, or the movie goer should show up at the entry point with a simple yes/no QR code certificate, or better still, should be able to share a yes/no certificate behind the scenes, so that the entry point knows, yeah, Simon has had the requisite test. It meets the requirements that I've set for him to enter, and I know that I can be sure that it hasn't been interfered with along the way. And at the same time, I'm not, as a venue or as an airline, as a country, I don't have to store Simon's medical data. He keeps that himself. And therefore, this pass is trusted, it's private, and it's been checked. Sorry, I think that might have been a very long answer, but you did ask about what makes a good health pass at a high level, and I think it's those three things.
No, absolutely right, Simon. You've not gone on too long there at all. You've highlighted some really important aspects. I'll invite Alex now to comment on that, because some of that will echo very well, I'm sure, with himself. But I suggest you might want to take that even further, Alex. Over to you.
Thank you, Raoul. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I think it's those three are very fair points. But I think even before we discuss what a good health pass is, I think there is a room for conversation around that. Actually, there is a lot of noise around health passports, and specifically mainly around the inclusion debate, right? Whether we can have something at the passport that will allow us to get inside of a cinema, theater, or indeed into international travel. And now we think that there is still room for debate whether we can use such systems for domestic use. Although for international travel, we just have to agree that as the same way as 9/11 was a precedent for APIs, and APIs is here nowadays, the advanced passenger information, basically the passport data that we all now send for the international travel. It means that COVID was a precedent for the health data to be demanded by the government. And in many ways, the pre-departure health status verification is here to stay. right? And it's not going to be less data that we as an industry process and send to the governments. It's going to be more and more data to come. And not to mention things like ETIAS, for example. We all look towards the health, but actually in a year's time, there's a European ETIAS coming into play, where identity also plays the key role. So I think that in a lot of our conversations with clients, we see that some are waiting for governments to introduce some initiatives, to introduce the immunity passports. But the reality is, we as an industry, we have to start execute and be prepared for the future. And I think in our conversation with clients, we do see a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, and a lot of confusion around this problem, this immediate problem that we have. And a lot of them are rushing really to fix immediate challenges, as opposed to think about one step beyond health. And that leads to sometimes use of solutions that are not even fit for purpose, for example. And just to echo, I think your 3 points, Simon, I think I would would approach this with a little bit different angle, and say that I see that there are two main challenges for us as an industry to overcome. And the first one being is we as an industry, we need to have a source of up-to-date in and outbound health requirements. That should be basically saying to an airlines or to any interested party, for this specific passenger, for this specific traveler, what do we need to check to ensure that this traveler has? And I think that's why the such initiatives as CommonPass framework are of a big importance, because that's the way to harmonize and harmonize all these different requirements cross nation. And it's the challenge there. It requires a lot of time to do that. And now the second challenge, in addition to the up-to-date health requirements, is that actually the fact that the health status is actually an identity problem. And what it means basically that it's not enough to have just verified medical record that says that this data is correct. It also has to be bound to verified identity. Otherwise, it's just basically open to forgery, and it's really easily done. So the challenge comes from the understanding that in order to solve health, we need to solve identity. And the problem in the airline industry is that it's not even that identity is broken in travel; it's non-existent, right? And we don't have enough digital identity infrastructure to support that.
Thank you, Alex. You made some really good points there. We've got health and the trustability, if that's a word, of health credentials there, the privacy aspect, but also the importance of identity in what's going on here as well. So let's spin this on its head a little bit. Let's fast forward and do a bit of future gazing. What would the future actually look like if we'd absolutely nailed this as an industry? So I'm looking here at what it is that you think that governments need to do, the industry needs to do, who needs to hold those responsibilities. So if we could paint that ideal picture, what would it look like? And we can include into this conversation a bit about standards and interoperability there as well. Simon, would you like to go first on that one? Or?
Yeah, sure. So I think a big part of it is something that I didn't manage to mention in my last answer, because I talked mostly about passes, but I think the wider infrastructure that we need to build towards and will be a part of that sort of grey future you described is trust network. And so the Commons project, where we envisage a global trust network, in fact we call it the Common Trust Network, of trusted health providers, trusted test centers, trusted vaccination centers, where we know that if a certificate or a vaccination pass has come from one of those centres, then we know it's authentic, and we understand its provenance, and we understand its provenance right back to the original digital signature at the lab. In line with that trust network are also governments. And so governments need to do a few things here, right? Firstly, they need to be able to buy into the idea of a trust network, i.e., if I am the government of France and someone comes with a test from a lab in Japan that the Japanese government has approved, then that's good enough for me as the French government, right? Because the governments trust each other's sub-networks. That already exists in plenty of walks of life of international agreement. It exists all over aviation and travel, for a start. What underpins the day-to-day functioning of that trust network, and by the day-to-day functioning, I mean people issuing credentials of tests, and those credentials being checked against rules, is standards mostly set by governments, but sometimes set by other agencies and institutions. So standards by which health data is communicated, that already exists to some extent, but is certainly not standardized throughout the world. Secondly, we need standards of rules, and this is where we're a long way off getting what we want to have in the future. So, for example, governments will set rules for entry to countries, but each government sets different rules. They describe tests in different ways. They require different timescales for tests to be taken, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because we're all talking about the same human beings carrying same or very similar versions of the same virus, and only different governments' medical teams have decided to express their entry rules in different ways. So some standard formats for expressing entry rules would make things substantially easier. And just going back to your original illustrative problem that you mentioned, the friend who had to go to Canada and back, that would have been way easier if all the governments had standardized rules. So I think standards for me comes right at the top of the list to support that idea of trust networks. And then, of course, you've got to overlay on that. If you've got a standardized way of recognizing labs and their information, you've got a standardized way of recognizing government's rules and entry. The final sort of leg of the stool is a standardized way of binding identity into that, so that you always know that the person who has been to that trusted lab and has got a trusted document will be able to access a country that has set standard rules and owns those rules going forward. And so that bound identity is really important. Probably Zamna better equipped to talk about that than I am.
Well, I think off the back of that, I'll hand straight to Alex. So you've mentioned identity before, and what is it beyond the labs and the testing and what governments need to do that flows right the way through into Zamna territory and what an airline needs, Alex?
Yeah, thanks. I think if we talk about the basically ideal solution or the future solution, I think there are two fundamental requirements that all have to supply. And I will echo Simon here, because the first one is actually it should be privacy preserving technology, and I think it's worth to call out specifically as many times as we can across the industry, because we can't really highlight this fact enough that it is of a great importance that the solutions that we are going to enroll globally should be privacy preserving and secure. At the same time, I think that the other fundamental requirement is to support for the solution to support open standards and initiatives, and to avoid this, vendor lock into one mobile application, to be interoperable with each other, not to create these closed loop systems. Now, and when we think about, I think if we just highlight the most important, I say, pillars of such a system, I would call 4 of them. With the first one being that an airline has to have a way to know all this up-to-date cross-border health requirement and registries in order to understand for the specific traveler, as I said, what is needed to be done. And ideally, this should be done almost like in the form of a checklist that a passenger then could follow. And as was discussed, the main challenge here is this harmonization between the countries. So I think that in terms of how it all involves, the solution has to be flexible enough to support any open initiatives and frameworks that are going to come in the future. So the second one, I think, is that the solution should enable not just to know which health requirements should be checked, but also it should enable travelers to adhere to these requirements before the airport. And I think that before the airport is of a great importance here as well, because what we see from some rollouts to some testing, that it's often, if, for example, a QR code is used within the airport, and we do think that any additional process brought into the airport with already strict requirements for space, and it's just what we are already seeing with the majority of airports. We work with a very low volumes, but the whole space is busy, and the queues are for many hours. The third element to add is that the verified health, as we discussed, it should be bound to verified identity, and this identity binding in practice means that something that was not done before should happen at the health provider. Namely, identity should be verified at the health provider, and it could be done in many different ways. But that's something. If we as an industry want to ensure the identity of a passenger, should happen with the health provider, and that's exactly what we're doing in a number of embodiments with our early clients. And I think that the fourth element into that is that we need to think about how can we scale technologies and how we can do this at scale. Because if you think about the barriers for adoption of any technology, then it's not that a problem to integrate with an airline. It's not a problem to integrate with the health provider. But if we introduce new applications, new flows, new unfamiliar processes for travelers, that is something that creates problems because that's the main adoption problem and adoption barrier for any kind of solution. So I think the question here is how fast can we scale if we don't have an app or any new additional process for traveler?
Thank you, Alex. Well, I'm going to take that need for speed and spin that back to Simon here. So you talked about the need for standards, and I couldn't agree more for that. However, I think we've all been in this industry long enough to know that if we wait for standards, we will be waiting for a very long time. So what is it then that CommonPass are doing to tackle this head on and to actually satisfy the needs that are going to come with the need to scale, hopefully this year?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the first thing is, use the standards that already do exist. So there are standards for transmitting health medical data. Okay, we're using those. Where we can help create standards, we're helping to create standards. So CommonPass founded an initiative called the Vaccination Credential Initiative, VCI. It's predominantly US based, and we founded it with some other organizations that we believed could have enough sort of muscle and leverage to make a difference, i.e., probably most of the major health providers in the US, the retail providers of vaccine like Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, and technology companies like Microsoft and Oracle. And together we are very long way down the road of establishing that and implementing that standard for how people can give a digital certificate to a vaccine. So I think firstly, use the ones that do exist. Secondly, get people together to create a standard, but realize that anyway, different regions will create their own standards. And of course, countries will create local solutions. We're working with probably a dozen substantial countries in the world, including the UK, who are all either thinking about or building or have built some kind of vaccination passport. I think it's a phrase that I don't really like, but the newspapers seem to use it and everyone understands what it means. An app on your phone that shows that you've been vaccinated. But they don't generally work in other countries. So how can we use something like CommonPass as a translation layer so that you could take one country's vaccination pass and have it used in other countries as well? Above all, and you guys talked about this earlier, if you are going to use standards and or create standards, they've got to be open. I mean, really open. You have to be truly interoperable, and that's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot these days, with a lot of people sort of saying, let's be interoperable without thinking about being interoperable. And a lot of people say, well, we're going to be totally open, and then they create a closed blockchain, for example, that's not open at all. So one of our most important philosophies is that we do use open standards, open architectures. We make sure that users control their own data and nobody controls their data for them. Users store their own data. I think these sort of fundamentals are the things that are going to make it scale. I guess I would add one other thing, and that is, not being app and API obsessed. Not being app and QR code obsessed. There seems to be 4, 5, 6 different digital health passes floating around at the moment that everyone's got very obsessed with these apps. All of them seem to rely on a QR code being presented to someone at a check-in desk. And yet, if you talk to the airlines, I mean, I must have talked to 40 different airlines at least by now about this. They all say the same thing, which is we don't want any QR codes, just like you said, Dan. They don't want QR codes in the check-in desk. They don't want any more transactions in the airport. They want it all taken away and done before the airport. They want to go back to online check-in. They want to go back to web mobile check-in. If it is at the airport, they want to use the kiosks again, which are switched off in many airports around the world now. The processes they've got in the airports and to some extent before the airports are manual back office processes that are not scalable. And so they know they need to embrace a digital solution, but they're struggling to, and they can't work out how they're going to integrate this morass of different apps and QR codes. Our view is that there doesn't need to be an app. Like, honestly, in a year or two time, if the CommonPass app has disappeared from the landscape, then fine, because we think that this is about creating standards and creating smooth flow of digitally signed certification that we can authenticate for anybody. And so we're expecting sort of authenticated by CommonPass to be sitting inside lots and lots and lots of third-party applications who can control the customer journey much better than we can. When I talk to, say, United Airlines, they don't want to send their customers to CommonPass. They want CommonPass embedded in the United Airlines flow, and fair enough. So I think that idea of scaling through using standards and embedding the verification passes into the existing flow will allow us to be able to scale and not rely on manual and back office processes that are going to just clog up the airports. That's my view.
Thank you, Simon. I think you've hit a number of nails on the head there, and the need for open standards is something that I know Alex feels very passionately about. In order to make this work and to to scale up in whichever way it might go, there needs to be a degree of well, not a degree. It's essential that you have this almost agnostic approach to how the solution space might come about. So, it's almost like the VHS Betamax, if you're old enough to remember that, or PlayStation, Xbox, if you're slightly younger. Which one's actually going to play out and be the one that becomes common? And what we might well see is that, say, in the Americas, you have one particular flavor, and in Europe or even the Far East, you have a different flavor or manifestation of this. So being open to that is imperative. Alex, something that was brought up there as well about that Simon mentioned was the need to not use an app. What is it that Zamna is doing in that space that means that an app is not needed?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, actually, Zamna tackles health problem with two different solutions. One of them being mobile-based, but another one requires Zamna Verified Health. It works on the background. It's truly inclusive because there are no mobile apps involved at all. There are no new unfamiliar processes for travelers, and it works not as a mobile application, as I said, but as a simple verification as a service solution, which requires basically low-touch integration with both airlines and health provider. And importantly, as I said before, it doesn't require for a passenger to have an app. And the way it basically works is for the traveler, the only thing they need to be ready is to take their identity document with them to the health center or to the vaccination center, indeed. And then once as today, traveler receive the PDF with the PCR, for example, test results. Everything is happening on the background, by which we generate a special anonymous mathematical signal, and you can linking identity and health data. You can think of this signal as being of a digital echo of the data. And importantly, the actual personal data, the actual sensitive data, never leaves either airline or health provider premises. So only anonymous signals, if you want, they persist on the network. And at the same time, identity data never meets health data in that regard, and identity data is never stored by the health provider. And the way it works for the passenger is basically the only thing that is new for them is then they go on the online check-in and they see the traditional passport data collection form with just a few additional fields, namely a certificate number and the date of test and time and the test result. And by collecting this data from a passenger directly, airline is capable to match this data with these digital echoes and to verify that both passport data and health certificate data are verified. And what's more important, they are connected with each other. So in this regard, we believe that with verified health application, it is truly scalable to the entire population because we don't have to introduce additional apps or additional processes for the key stakeholders in the journey who are travelers.
So that sounds very, very interesting, Alex. And obviously, I've got a bit of an inside track on this. But you talk there about these two entities being decoupled. The airline and the airport doesn't need to know about the health provider. Is that a centralized solution in some way? I mean, how are you achieving this? It seems kind of strange that you've gone from PII information to not putting anything out there, but you're able to verify later, further down the line. What is it that's different here?
Yeah, that's truly the unique and patented process we have on our side that allows to take the personal data that sits within the airline premises or within the health provider premises and to convert this data into the basically meaningless gibberish of information, which you can think of this of a super hash. if we want to go technical. And this data is then distributed across the network, and there is no reverse. It's unfeasible to reverse the signal back, which basically means that supported by the independent client research, it will take for malicious actor and for Zamna itself about 1 to 10 million years for each signal to understand what it actually means. So we have this. We decouple the data, the personal data itself, from the verification of this data, and the only way to get any meaning from the system is to be in possession of this original data, which airline receives from the passengers, from travelers nowadays anyway.
I see. I'm going to follow up with another question then. Sorry to Alex again then. So you're able to do that. And what role then does CommonPass play in that overall world then, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think as Simon described, there is extremely important element to be resolved, and there is no one project that we will dominate here. It's more about us all uniting to solve this harmonization problem. And from the technology perspective, what we do on our side is we ensure that our clients stay agnostic to all the upcoming initiatives and frameworks, including CommonPass, because the idea here is that, as you said before, for certain areas, the CommonPass will be the de facto the option to go for an airline, but we do this through what we call the custom rules engine, which basically enables organization to start small, start even with manual rules, connect products like thematic to source for requirements, or indeed connect with the CommonPass framework to ensure that the requirements are met by the specific passenger. And you can do that as a plug and play. Sorry.
So Simon, I'll come back to you then. And so we're talking about rules now and harmonization. What is it then that CommonPass are doing in and around that to bring that harmonization to life? Is this where you put a lot of effort in?
In rules?
In rules, and the coming together, that almost codification from a global perspective of all that's going on, and that noise we talked about at the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've built a database of entry rules, and importantly for us, that's more than just the rules to enter countries by air, which I think is where most of the focus has been so far. It also includes rules that could describe the entry to a sports event or concert or a hotel. In our architecture, we see the owner of those rules being the person, the organization, the government that defines them. And our vision is, when we talked about what it could look like in a long time in the future, that governments are maintaining their own rules. At the moment, if you think about it, governments publish rules on, one of their own site pages, something.gov dump something somewhere, and a variety of sort of scraping tools, workshops of people are constantly keeping those trying to keep track of those rules and forming rules databases. I think that's a stopgap. I think a better solution is for us to create this globally consistent rules database, which governments update their own rules. Honestly, for entry rules to a country for health, about COVID tests and vaccinations, there are not that many different, sensible, usable combinations of rules. If you were to design it from scratch, you would probably have a menu of sort of 5 or 6 different rules, maybe 10. But at the moment, there's significantly more than that because of this lack of standardization. So we're building that database, and we're engaging with governments, as I say, to say, hey, we'd like you to put your rules in this database in this format, and we'd like you to own them and update them. And I think that's probably the best chance we have of cutting through the confusion and smoke of the moment by getting people to own their own rules.
Yeah, thank you. And I can see that it's just so important to get the consistency through that. And if you've got a single point of truth, then that makes life so much easier for everyone. Yeah. Something you mentioned earlier on, actually, Simon, was you talked about Delta, I think, as being an example about providing to the traveller themselves, that fair-paying customer, the ability to transact with the person they're giving their money to, and to do that in a consistent way. That means that your user experience remains within that ecosystem of, say, an airline, as being pretty critical. Flick a question there back. Well, actually, let's start with yourself, Simon. How important is it, thinking back to your airline days as well, how important is it to stay within the airline app or within the airline ecosystem from a point of view of brand retention and control of that user experience?
I mean, for the airlines, it's superbly important, but probably, honestly, a bit more important than it needs to be. The airlines see ownership of customer experience as sort of the be-all and end-all, right from this point of trip planning and search through to completion. Honestly, there are other people who could also claim to own the customer journey during that time. And so, most people at some point make a booking on Expedia or Booking.com or Trip.com or something like that. And those players try to do exactly the same thing. And if you're going on business travel, it's quite likely you're working for a sizable company, then your company will have mandated that your trip experience will be owned by Amex or Carlson Wagon Lee, or one of those big travel management companies. So I think beyond the airlines, there are several other players who wish to own the travel experience. Good luck to them. Our view at the Commons Project is we don't need to be another of those players trying to own a bit of the customer experience, right? What we're trying to do is simply make the world a bit of a better place by getting people back to work, back to travel, back to life, back to school. And as much as we can help the other actors to do that, that's all good. We would like to do it in a way that means that people hold their own data, control their own data, and as many people benefit from this as possible. So I think for us, that's probably where we sit, and that's why we're very happy to enable the user experience of airlines, travel companies, OTAs, etc.
Thank you, Simon. Let's flick that then to Alex. How does Zamna address this, and how does Zamna ensure that the brand who's selling, be that an OTA, a TMC, or indeed an airline, actually manages to keep their customer and stay in control of that and give the customer what they need?
Right. Yeah, it's a perfect question. I guess from Zamna perspective, we first of all, we don't have our own B2C app, but we either empower airline or our clients' own mobile applications that they have, airlines, OTAs, and car rental companies and hotels, or we distribute this as a customizable white label app. Now, the mobile aspect of that is a Zamna Travel Pass, our high-end mobile solution that allows basically traveler to form a valid, up-to-date travel checklist within the mobile application of an airline, or it could be white labeled. Then they use the same mobile application to basically verify their identity with an airline. Book a test, find and book a test within the given time frame by the rules, which was sourced from the rules engine, and then receive the credential from the health provider and share all this data back with an airline and with an airport, or indeed with the government. to ensure that both identity, health, and biometrics are verified through the process. Now, the Zamna's Travel Pass is based on Altitude. It's our own self-sovereign identity proposition, where we flip the model, and it is now Traveler, indeed, who stores all this personal data on their phone within the mobile application of our client. And we don't try, to take this away from our clients, but we shield all the complexity, because identity is very complex, and our travel clients are not really experts, and it's not the core business of our clients to work with identity. What we do, we shield all the complexity around identity and around identity orchestration in the case of Travel Pass behind the very simple to use APIs. Now, at the same time, we talk about health and how Zamna Travel Pass solves that, but actually it goes far beyond the immediate health issue, because it's in fact the Travel Pass application is just one of many Altitude applications and just one of many identity orchestration templates that we support on the platform level. So I think that there is also an element of what I was referring to in the beginning, is that any organization should really think about the products, the identity products they're bringing within their organization, because this product should be able to become the identity backbone for the whole organization. And without doing this, there is a strong risk of having much more complex and legacy infrastructure, and much more costs associated and risks associated with that.
Thank you, Alex. And when you talk about identity in that way and a self-sovereign solution, isn't there a danger that more and more credentials could end up there that actually weakens the client in some way? Self-sovereign being of such that the individuals in charge of the information, they can share whichever bit of information to whoever. Is there an implication to that?
Yes, we do see, and this is something not really yet fully understood by the community within the airlines themselves, is that if you're going with the default self-sovereign identity solution, and the way the current pioneers around that, introducing that into the ecosystem, is that the orchestrational element is done, for example, using the what is known flight credential, being basically the digitally signed version of your boarding pass. But because the self-sovereign identity is built on the principle that you, as an end customer, you own your data, then the minute you, as an airline, for example, provide the boarding pass to the identity wallet within the decentralized environment, this can be shared with all of your competitors in a way. And the same question raises when we want, as an organization, as an airline, for example, to attach a loyalty tier to the travel pass, right? And to enable, for example, lounge access or the better services during the journey. This loyalty tier is visible to everyone. So what we have in our own implementation of self-sovereign identity is an overlay to a verifiable credential that enables organizations to basically restrict the use of some of the commercially sensitive information that goes beyond SSI.
So you'd end up with a combination potentially of things like vaccines or health certificates. You'd have potentially passports, which are much more openly shareable, and you can see being for the greater good, and you might well need actually to transit various countries. But you're also seeing actually other credentials which make sense to store within the SSI world, because you're switching the model on its head and moving the data out of the centralized storage to a decentralized solution. But you're able to protect those assets as well, and thus get the best of both worlds. Is that correct?
Fully correct, yes. And we do see this more and more becoming a challenge for adoption of SSI in general, because we do, especially because of this general question, who owns the customer, right? Within the SSI world, there is no one who owns the customer. more than anything, what we do in our work is we provide a way for all these organizations to work collaboratively and jointly to provide this seamless journey end-to-end for the customer, because there is no one industry in the world where we have so many stakeholders working jointly to enable the one simple, in quotes, journey.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alex, for that insight. I'm just conscious we've got just only 5 minutes left. This past hour has flown by. So actually, I invite you back, Simon, just to make closing comments in and around what you're doing and maybe what we can look forward to in the coming months.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we at Commons Project are sort of both, humble and aware of the size of this task that we are all, your organization, our organization, the people in the call today, endeavoring to solve. It's multilateral, multi-geo, multi-everything problem to solve. And no one player is going to solve it on their own. Yet we're confident that it can be solved. We think that good progress is being made. I guess all of us will look at it and say it's not going as fast as we want it to, and maybe not as fast as we need it to. And the more that we can stick to those principles that we've touched on again and again, the principle of self-sovereign, the principle of ownership, of open architectures and open standards, the better. But we will get there if we collaborate and cooperate in the right way. I see great progress. I've seen on our end, CommonPass is being used by travelers now. Just in the last few weeks, Asia, Europe, USA, Middle East. We're shortly about to start major trials in Africa. Some of the biggest vaccination points in the world have signed up and said, yeah, every time we give a vaccine, we'll issue a credential that's compatible with these open architecture passes like CommonPass. So I do see progress. I wish it was going faster. I think we always wish things went a bit faster. And with this amount of multilateral government standard making can be very slow. But I do see an opportunity here. I think we will crack it. We just got to stick to those principles.
Absolutely, thank you, and I couldn't agree more. We have got to stick to those principles, and it's up to us in the end to actually make it go as fast as we can.
Yeah.
It's always a challenge when governments are involved, and there's a bit of politics in there. But there seems to be a consensus that we do want to move forward, and we've got to restart the world. So I echo what you've said there, Simon. Thank you. And yourself, Alex, what have we got to look forward to in the coming months?
Thank you. Yeah, I would fully agree that the full recovery and the harmonization of rules is going to take a while. But again, we as an industry, we can't really wait. We can't really, afford ourselves to just wait for governments to resolve. And there are a number of ways how can we move and how can we move fast and without, ripping in place that will change the whole infrastructure of an airline. And I think I do see that we have a great opportunity as an industry, because before COVID, realistically, the identity element was a nice to have, but it caused a lot of friction, a lot of problems for the whole industry and for travelers. And now identity becoming the must have, right? Identity has to be sorted before you travel, because otherwise you can't sort the verified health on top of that. And I do think that those organizations who can embrace the change that is coming and who can start to change the rails today are definitely going to win.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Great closing comments. Just leaves me to say thank you to both yourself, Alex, and to yourself, Simon, as well. Really enjoyed chatting with you this afternoon. I think we've shown how we are making fantastic progress in this world, despite a number of factors that are beyond our control. So I'm optimistic for the future. We've got some follow-up podcasts actually coming, webinars, I should say, coming from Zamna, where we will look much more into the role that the labs who are doing the testing play as well. And we'll do some deeper dives into our respective products of both Zamna Travel Pass and Zamna Verified Health. If in the meantime you have got questions, please do feel free to reach out to us very, very simply at hello@zamna.com. And I'm sure Simon would welcome yourselves as well if you want to get in touch with him at CommonPass. And I'm guessing the best way to do that, Simon, would be via LinkedIn or the CommonPass website.
LinkedIn is great, yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much for being with us today. Please do look out for our follow-up webinar, not podcast, that will be coming in the coming weeks. And we look forward to spending some more time digging deeper and solving these big industry challenges. So thank you from all three of us. Have a great day.